to be here. So, first and foremost, the reason this went from 23 to 19 pages is I changed the size of the font. When Donovan and I started working on it, we honestly didn't feel that it was too bad overall. So that the work that Diane Mayo had done in 2001 and 2002 actually still was substantially correct. Where I've always had problems is, and my biggest problem every time we give a contract to a new library, such as we will be doing for Red Wing High School, within the body of the contract, there was a list of SELCO responsibilities and online library obligations, and then there was another list in writers' theory in one of the writers, and some of the wording was identical, and some of the things were different, and some of them were discrete in one area and not repeated in the other, and it was always very confusing. So if nothing else, I wanted to blend all of that so that the list of what SELCO, what your expectations, what you can expect from SELCO was in one list, and that SELCO's expectations of you and your responsibilities was also in one list. So I was going to give this to you as the track changes, but as you know, when you start cutting and moving things, it was getting to be like 40 pages long with nothing but, this got moved. And since we were not making really changes to the substance, but really more formatting and where we were putting things. So I can sort of walk you through this. The first paragraph of the agreement, there were no changes. In the purpose, there was only a slight change in that it actually referred to things like MARC records. And so any place where the cataloging language was much more elaborate and referring to MARC and LC subject headings and those kinds of things, we took that out. I talked with Cheryl, and we just simply refer to a much broader term of bibliographic database development and maintenance, with the idea being, I think we are over the days where a contract had to say we're going to use Library of Congress subject headings. Back when we did this contract originally, we still had people arguing for years. I think we're beyond that. Definitions area stayed pretty much the same. One area that got changed was we eliminated reference to the RAID array. No. Disk array. Yeah, disk array. And now we have a storage area network. And then a lot of the things that we cleaned up were when we bought this system, it was an information portal. Now it's Horizon Information Portal, and obviously the contract was written in such a way as everything referred to Dynex, because that's the name of the company, as opposed to Cersei Dynex. With regards to, so after 2A, the rest of 2 in the contract had no changes. There were no changes in C3, rather, the contract with Cersei Dynex. In 4, the services provided by SELCO. This was the list that was there and then merged with what was Writer C. Again, not a lot of changing. So, conduct long-range planning and capital development and future upgrades or ILS migrations. Those words were identical in the old contract. In 5, again, it was a merger from what was in the contract and then a list that was in the writer. And again, your responsibilities stay pretty much the same. We did some modifying of what is the new H. The old language was really the old language was that you could only connect equipment supplied by us, period. End of discussion. And that is not how we operate. So we changed it. Donovan and I worked on H, that we would work cooperatively and you'd communicate. And yes, if you're going to add stuff to a network that is going to touch the databases, then we need to know what's going on. But know the necessity of only buying equipment from us or only installing the equipment that we provide you never was, and I don't know why it was in the contract to begin with. The responsibilities of the board weren't even in the contract. They were all in a rider. So that whole section, which is the new 6, is verbatim from the old rider, and got it into the contract because the board is the organizing body, so it should be in the contract. Payments made to libraries, 7, insurance, 8, and title to equipment, all of that stayed the same. And then 10, the new 10, was really, really strange because the paragraphs underneath are what they always were. Who owns the item? You own your item records. Now, the Cat in the Hat is Stewartville, and that barcode number is Stewartville's property held in ownership. The Cat in the Hat that St. Charles owns is their property. The bib records and the patron records are shared jointly. That stayed the same. And you have the right to those if you leave the consortium. So those 3 paragraphs stayed the same, but the title of 10 used to be sharing resources, which I have no idea why it was labeled sharing resources when it was all about records. So, and ownership. And so Jonathan and I labeled it what it is, which is who owns the database records.
And that's number 10?
Number 10.
I'm in the other document. I was in the summary of the changes.
I decided I'd just go through the changes. Okay. Since I figured you read the summary and I would.
Yeah.
Terms of the agreement, that changed, that the first paragraph, the big paragraph, stayed the same. I did think it was probably better for the same reason that we do county contracts periodically. This contract has not been looked at since you all signed it in 2002. I'm guessing that most of you can't find your copy. Or you all know right where it is, and I'm being unkind. Yeah. And so I thought, you know, whether it's 5 years or it should be shorter or longer, 5 years seemed to be a good period of time because 3 seemed too short when we're dealing with 90 locations, about 47 governmental units. But I also didn't want it to go on indefinitely because I just feel uncomfortable with this open-ended, once you sign it, it's forever. So hence my recommendation that it would be a 5-year contract. Termination, amendments, entire agreement, governing law, headings, and counterparts all stayed the same. And then signatures. And then there was some stuff that went ahead and stayed as a rider. The confidentiality agreement is identical because that was actually provided by the Dynex, now Cersei Dynex attorneys. And originally, and I have a call into them, is that if we redo the contract, whether or not I actually have to provide this to them again, because what had to happen when we signed this originally is Cersei Dynex actually needed copies of this rider for their files. Conflict resolution was in the document. This procedure has never been used. However, I did not feel comfortable just deleting it. A conflict could arise. And so instead of having it in the body of the contract, it got moved to the rider. And automation fees has been updated to include the fact that the schools, when this contract was signed, the schools were getting 2 days a week at the paid for by SELCO. And now we have the schools with 3-day-a-week delivery with one of the days paid for by the school. So they have an added fee in addition to the per pupil fee that the public libraries do not have. And then thank you for James for catching the fact that the ILS Ops Committee was in here. I took that out because I didn't want it tied to the contract, and I felt it allowed this committee more flexibility to structure itself. So, at the bottom of the summary, it gives what I thought might be a time frame for what would happen. Review by this committee, share with the online libraries because not everyone is here today and different people would be attending the September online technology meeting. take it out for signing, and then obviously it's going to take a while because we've got library boards that only meet quarterly. We've got school boards who a little bit more difficult to get on their agenda. Allow for a 4-month signing period. SELCO staff can certainly go out if any of SELCO staff will be available for site visits should questions arise with local governing authorities. Delete the A. And then the new contracts would start. So that's my recommendation to you.
I have a question about the automation fee stuff. The item records were assessed based on item records in part, right?
Correct.
What do you do about Chatfield Music Funding Library? Because they have something like 1.3 million items.
I think for them, we use the number of disc records because their volume is so small. That is off the top of my head, James. I don't remember how we actually calculate.
Because it would be strange that would be an exception in the contract that we've all signed, right?
Yep, they signed the same contract. They signed the old contract because as new libraries have come on, they have gotten the same contract that you all signed in 2002. I would have to go back to Amy and see how that was done, or if she's actually using their item records as well. I don't suspect that they don't and that we did do an exception because the largest payer of automation fees is Rochester Public Schools. And certainly Chatfield Brass Band has more items than Rochester Public Schools. I can check on that.
Any comments or questions about the agreement as outlined by Ann? What was the? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's my own fault. I only looked at it a few days ago, and it contracts are scary, and so then I was thinking about, well, gosh, what makes me feel like a donkey being dragged down the hill, you know, with a heavy load, and because and there's nothing in there specifically, I don't think, except it takes me months. I just feel like I don't want to both stay, and that maybe I should have been reading it a long time ago.
That's a good point. I'd like to go back and compare now and see exactly how it's changed and what's going on. So
And,
I'm not ready.
So that's just how I'm feeling. So, and maybe with good reason, maybe not, but probably not. One of the things I was thinking about the 5-year term was that this is a contract that our library board will be asked to sign, and 5 years is a really long time for a library board in terms of turnover, just like anything else, like it's a 3-year staggered term. So that 5 years means that, you know, anything that we sign now, 5 years from now, you're talking about almost maybe half or more being completely new people. So you have to bring them kind of all on board again with, you know, changes. So that in a way, a 3-year term, it's just like when you review your policies every year. It's easy because you just saw it. So I was thinking about that, and also thinking about how quickly things change, and it just seems like change is speeding up more and more. So that I am having I can't imagine what public libraries are going to look like 10 years from now in just 2 years, 2 times of signing the contract. I don't have a very clear idea of what it's going to look like 5 years from now.
Are you suggesting an annual contract?
I'm wondering why not? Why not an annual contract that renews every year? What's the disadvantage of that for SELCO? I can, you know, what does a 5-year contract give you? A different ability to plan, or
Yeah, if this group recommends an annual contract, I will take, that one would have to go to the board and I would advise against it. Because I am not going to continue to try and plan for technology where we are making $100,000 and $200,000 and $300,000 purchases with the idea that every single one of the libraries could be out of the picture tomorrow. I feel that we would spend all of our time trying to figure out who is in and who is out. I would feel very unsure.
Sure. Yeah.
And
do you truly anticipate though anyone really dropping out?
I don't know. You know, when we.
I mean, I know it's happened, but
I think it's happened, and it's just happened, you know, across the state. We have a library that is leaving a region.
But you can still give notice according to this agreement, right?
That's right.
Right.
So, I mean, you can
But
still.
then you'd have to pay for it for the next 4 years. You know, that was unclear to me. If
No,
you know,
the only payment was required after the first 2 years, and that's why that was something that was in the letter of intent to participate. It was never in the contract.
So let's just say that we sign the contract today for 5 years from now, and the world in Austin just changes dramatically 2 years into the contract for whatever reason. Doesn't matter what it is. We want out. What are our options?
You give us 6 months notice.
Out the door.
And I don't have to pay you after
You have
that?
to pay, if you want your data, you have to pay to extract the data.
Sure. So then what is the benefit of a 5-year contract? You still don't know year to year, or you don't know in 6 months if everybody's going to leave.
I think that I guess my question also would be, is that really what you want the staff doing, is going out every year to visit your libraries? Because we have a whole lot of other things that we could be doing that are actually work-related, that are for better customer service. I have to say, this is not the discussion I thought we would have. You have a contract right now that is 12 years old.
Right.
That no one has probably looked at. I'm willing to guess that no one in this room actually has looked at it. And so, all right.
I did when we had it. It was already signed.
I would get it. And so, you know, I guess I thought maybe it would be the other way, and that you would be arguing we don't want to do it every 5 years because it's, you know, really the number of changes in this document have been so few.
Right.
I mean, you know, we're still going to run an ILS. We're still going to have bibliographic database maintenance and quality control.
Right.
The issues about that have actually diminished. I mean, 5 years ago we had big fights as to whether or not we should have anything to do with OCLC, and now everyone has embraced OCLC. So,
Was there a compromise here, like a 3-year contract? Well, and maybe it's a non-issue, but I guess I'm wondering, okay, having been in a couple of very bad contracts with the carpet cleaning people.
We're not providing that.
You know, what do different people get out of it, and what are the hurdles, and also it's sort of a dry run for when you're going to go to, you know, present it to whatever other library, you know, where are they going to drag their feet, and where, you know, where are they answers, and I think 5 years is a possible place where people would drag their feet. And if you can get out at any time, then what exactly is it that you're signing anyway, except just the agreements for how to participate? These are the rules for participation.
and that is something that we have some continuity with, the idea that you can, I think if I were you, I would say, okay, then if this is a new contract every year, SELCO could change what it will do every year. So there will be nothing for you to rely on, that we won't greatly diminish or change our list of responsibilities. And likewise, that we're looking at the fact that you have some responsibilities with regards to inputting and sharing patron records and training your staff, that gives you the ability to plan, because you know that you are going to need to designate an online staff member to be a person who can do that work. And Donovan, I interrupted.
No, you didn't. And I think really that gets to kind of the heart of the matter. When we worked on this, Ann and I know I was not thinking about it in terms of how a library gets out of the contract. It was really more what Ann just said, which is for the next 5 years, this kind of provides the general structure of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it in terms of, say, equipment or services connecting to the database. It provides the same thing for you, a general understanding of how SELCO is going to operate automation services. And both of us can now plan and look to the future knowing that we have that framework in place. So to me, that's the benefit of the 5-year duration. It's not an open-ended thing where you've signed on to something now that basically will go on forever. It's not a 1-year plan, which allows us way too much volatility if we just wanted to start changing the automation fees every year. Not that we would do that, but it's in the contract for 5 years. So, yeah, you've raised an interesting point about the whole getting out of the contract, and I'll admit I didn't think about that.
Well, and not that we would, I'm not saying anything, but okay, so then, so, you know, if I'm going to sign it, I have to think, okay, what's in it for Oxford Public Library? I mean, what, you know, when you're going to sign in it. Great, you just gave me a really great thing that's in it for me. You're telling me what you're going to sell me for 5 years, and you're saying you're not going to change that for 5 years because you've signed on it, saying what you're going to do. That's really valuable. So then the other one was for forever. Are there then as you said, is there not the other way? Why not just, why, you said 5 years, what kinds of things do you think might change, or do you not think that things might change?
You know, I think we've written this, the language, and that's why I go back to Diane Mayo. So, for example, under your responsibilities, input, maintain, and share bibliographic records following standardized rules established by SELCO for uniform data entry. That language was there. I don't see us changing it. If we change it, it's changed because now we're not using MARC and now we're using RDA. We took out the references in that sentence to MARC and LC, but we left it as broad as possible. I don't see, we left the provide materials within the guidelines of interlibrary loan procedures for region and statewide. If the state changes, it doesn't say how we do those procedures. We're looking, MinLink is looking at a whole new ILL system. So how we do MinLink could change radically in the next year. But this doesn't say that you will turn around 2 times before you lend something. It just says you're going to follow ILL procedures. Conversely, we say we're going to manage a wide area network. We don't say that we're going to provide you, if you go all the way back to the DRA days, it said that you were going to have a 9.6 line. Well, we did away with 9.6 and we upgraded everybody to 56K, and then we moved everybody to T1, and now we're talking gigabits practically. Not quite, but. So, as you look through this, while library services are changing radically, I don't know that some of these things will change. How we provide training might change. The fact that we should provide you training on these modules for your staff, your designated volunteers, and how to use this, and we should provide you with documentation, isn't going to change. Used to be we provided you with print manuals. Well, you don't want print manuals. Say, well, we can't give you, we don't have them. So we provide you with the procedures, so we do it differently.
Right.
So I think the language, I feel that the language is broad enough to accommodate the changes that actually happen and are meaningful changes in your libraries without being straitjacket within the contract.
Well, I'm looking at the new reality. I'm no longer allowed to sign any contracts. So therefore, everything has to go through our city attorney first.
And that's fine.
And into the city manager.
When some of these contracts that we have right now that were signed in 2002 had to go to city attorneys. And some of them I will have to change the signatory because this right now is set out as the online library, but like in the case of Northfield and Faribault, it has to go to city council. It can't go to the library board. So, these can be modified as needed. But that's, again, maybe an argument for a longer contract, Peggy, because do you really want to be going to the city council every 3 years?
It doesn't have to go to city council. It only has to go to city manager. You know, my question is,
I guess what I'm trying to say is this has to go to my attorney, and if he doesn't like something in here, do you change it on an individual basis or not? What we did last time is that there were a number of city attorneys that looked at it. We shared, I got their suggestions for language changes, and I negotiated with those individuals because we had the advantage of legal minds, and between myself, Diane Mayo, and the 3 attorneys that had some suggested changes, we worked them out. Okay. So I would go back to your city attorney and say, here's the intent, give us some words, and unless it really was, I felt, or our SELCO attorney felt, was harmful to the rest of the libraries, I don't think anyone necessarily is going to argue. So before the final contract would go out for signing, we would get input from anybody who needs to get legal advice before signing.
I have one suggestion, since all this stuff is based on 3-year terms and 9-year limits, why about doing instead of 5, go to 6? So it sort of falls in to address your board members. If your board members are involved, still is a reasonable time in the case, and you have that chance where you at least have a portion of your board that rotates through one. You know, 5 is an arbitrary number you grab, but
I picked 5 because 3 seemed too short and forever seemed too long.
but I'm just thinking 6 fits in the way the whole system seems to be structured.
That's a great suggestion, John.
I just wanted to say that for public school libraries, if you had to take this to your school board every year,
I was just going to say this not.
that would be a nightmare. There's some years I wouldn't want to walk in the door with it because if they're looking at budget, it's a small item on their thing, but the money isn't, and they'll just say, okay, that's it, we're done.
The part of the reason I like a shorter one, to me personally, 5 is perfectly acceptable. It's not just the contractual obligations. I think it's always a good opportunity to look at these things
And review it.
because it's a reminder of your responsibilities, it's a reminder of how the organizations work together, and I think that if you go too long, then obviously we've got 10, 11 years later and we haven't even looked at it. And I think, so personally I'm okay with 5. I just want to step in here. I mean, we're kind of rolling up some time. There have been a couple of requests to think about this some more. What's the committee's desire here? Would you like to table this until later to have some more time to think and digest? And
until you meet with your September,